community, as you know. The Tucson Symphony has been here for over 80 years, 82, 83 years. That makes us older than the Los Angeles Philharmonic, older than the Salt Lake City, Utah Symphony. We're much older than the Phoenix Symphony Orchestra. That makes us the oldest orchestra in this entire region, or more or less, south of San Francisco and west of St. Louis. We're it. There are a number of reasons for that. One of them was that going back into the 20s, artists and especially writers would be sent down here by their doctors for the air. They told their friends, everybody kept coming here, and in fact Tucson was a burgeoning arts community going all the way back to 1929 when the Tucson Symphony was founded. At that time the population of the city was somewhere in a few tens of thousands of people, maybe 30, 40, 50,000 people. There were 5,000 members of the Tucson Music Club. Can you imagine? That's basically a sixth of the entire population, which is remarkable. In order to get in, you had to play 2 instruments well enough to perform for others. It was a remarkable time and a remarkable history that Tucson had. So we've covered the obvious education, we've covered the real estate. Now let's talk about the actual direct and indirect economic impact of the Tucson Symphony, and that's what we really need to concentrate on here for the next few minutes. We have a budget of about $3.5 million. That's down from almost $5.5 million just 3 or 4 years ago. During that time of contraction of our expenses, and most recently a very remarkable contraction in terms of what we would refer to as inventory. In other words, like an airplane or an airline would consider an empty seat on a plane is essentially inventory that's been thrown away. And we view it pretty much the same way. We've reduced that inventory by reducing the number of performances. However, in this process, in the last 18 months to 24 months, we've actually maintained a steady level of earned revenue. Now that's pretty remarkable considering we contracted our expenses by a huge amount and have maintained the same level. Now there are a number of reasons for that, incidentally, and why the Tucson Symphony is bucking the national trend, which is generally downward in terms of ticket sales for culture and fine arts. Number one, of course, is we're pretty good. If you have ever spoken, perhaps one of the ways that orchestras prove to their community how good they are is they go to Carnegie Hall. Well, we weren't quite equipped to do that financially because that costs about $250,000. The orchestras like Dallas will then come back with these fabulous reviews and say, look what the New York critics think of us. Did you know we were so good? Now, let's talk about ensuring that Dallas continues to have a symphony. We can't do that. So in 2008, we made a recording. How many of you knew that the Tucson Symphony's first internationally released recording went to number 2 on the U.S. classical charts? Anybody? 2? Maybe 3 people? I think Tim B. knew because I told him. We beat the Chicago Symphony, the Philadelphia Orchestra, the New York Philharmonic. The only person who beat us was Joshua Bell playing the Four Seasons, which is sort of like asking a kid, well, now do you want the steak or do you want the ice cream? Then they took the ice cream that week. That's okay. And Josh remains a friend. But I think one of the things that you can be confident in is that the Tucson Symphony is doing more with less than just about any organization like us, either here in Tucson or, frankly, in the United States. Our annual budget of $3.5 million would keep the Chicago Symphony open for about, I think we calculated, 14 business days. To put that in perspective, our players are making what it amounts to a part-time salary. But when you talk to your friends who come here from Seattle, for example, one of the most recent ones I had, and their budget is much higher, their players are much better paid, and they play in a really terrific concert hall. The thing this person said to me was 2 things, and he had no reason to compliment me other than he seemed to be genuinely interested. He said, number 1, your performance was more exciting, and 2, your players were all smiling. And that's a remarkable thing to say. But I have to say that despite the incredible challenges that our people have faced, and it's been really quite dramatic, they continue to sound better and better every single concert, not just every year. I'm constantly amazed. They also maintain that level in an extremely competitive environment because we are in a situation where perhaps there's a gap between the understanding of the community in terms of what the orchestra is doing and what it could be doing for the city. We are in a place where we have these wonderful players who are sadly lured away to orchestras that are not necessarily any better. In fact, many times they're not better at all. But they pay 1, 2, 3, 4 times as much money. And I'm sad to say that there's an orchestra about 140 miles up the interstate, who shall remain nameless, which has recently lured away a concertmaster and a flutist purely on the basis of the fact that we're just not offering them enough work. So how does this all fit in? Well, I can tell you that essentially we as an organization are an integral part of this community in a way that I think is not quite broadly enough understood. Try to imagine what happened, and by the way, there's no danger of this. Last year, balanced budget. This year, balanced budget. Next year, we expect a balanced budget. We're very, very solid in that respect. But just imagine what would happen if the symphony goes away. I can tell you that a certain little catchphrase that we came up with recently is, there's no such thing as a great American city without a great American orchestra. It just, you could broaden that perhaps a little bit and say there's no such thing as a great American city without a cultural heart. When you think of the difference between a great city like Atlanta, and then let's say a city which shall remain nameless, but my brother lives there, which is probably nearly as big as Atlanta, maybe a bit smaller, but is essentially a broad series of strip malls and residential areas and strip malls that just simply spread out. The difference between a great city is that, and what I just described, is in fact that cultural heart. What we're trying to do as an organization now is trying to bridge the gap of understanding what it is that we're doing for businesses and trying to make more connections, as we did with Catherine Baxla, as we have with others. Great partnerships are born of those things. For example, we bring 60,000 adult, mostly evening visits to downtown. 60,000. It's a remarkable number. What happens then to the money that gets spent?